Mustache Tales.
Yeah!
Hello. Here we are. So I'm going to tell a story about Hayes and our guest today. We were at game 2 of the Ducks Blackhawks playoffs. I think it was maybe the conference championship in Anaheim, and it was a double overtime game, and it was incredible. I mean, it was just massive and incredible. And when it was tied 2-2, Andrew Shaw headbutted the puck into the goal, and they all celebrated, and then the goal was disallowed. But then the Blackhawks ended up winning anyway, and the mood in the stadium was, pretty dour because the Ducks had lost a very difficult double overtime game. And so now we're all wearing these red Blackhawks sweaters, and we're, walking out of the stadium. And Hayes is going, "Did anybody catch the score? Does anybody know who won this thing?" And I look at his brother Scott, who's our guest, and he goes, "There's no stopping him." And I was like, "Wait, there's such a good chance we're going to get into a fight here." He goes, "That's the point."
The turn of that game, didn't we watched the first 2 periods. It was a really tight, slow game. And then we went outside and smoked a peace pipe and came back, and we saw the headbutt goal, and it became one of the most absurd, exciting hockey games from that point on. It was, we're like, did we do this too late? We got a 2-hour drive back to LA. But then there was another hockey game because it went to double overtime. So we got 3 more periods.
Yeah, I just, I went to a Dodger game like 2 weeks ago, and I told that exact story because everybody was like, "Oh, I never wear away gear to LA sporting events because of all these tragedies at the Dodger games, and these parking lots are insane." And they're like, "Only an idiot would do that." And I was like, well, my brother, not only does he wear a Blackhawks jersey, but his jersey says Hazer on the back. It doesn't even say, it's number 10, which was his football number in college. And at the time, there was a player number 10, Patrick Sharp, on the Hawks. So he's wearing a current first-line winger's jersey, but with his nickname on the back. So he just gets chirped relentlessly from behind. And then by the time the third period goes, and in those days, the Hawks, if they had the upper hand, I mean, he just gave it back to every fan in the parking lot on the way to the car. It was inevitable.
But even your friends, your hockey player friends, would always bust my chops about that Hazer jersey, and they'd be like, "I don't remember. Hey, what year was Hazer drafted? Is he a Russian player? I don't."
Yeah, I don't. I'm trying to think of the last time I got a nickname on the back of a jersey. Was a Blackhawks jersey, number 6, and it was Big Mac, and I was in first grade. So it is a weird move to pull as an adult.
What was your the jersey that you had, the Tony Esposito jersey? It was a relic, like a real jersey from the 60s, and you got to meet him, and like he defaced.
You're conflating 2 jerseys. Our father has a Blackhawks jersey from the 60s, and it's number 69. Which is just like really gives you an insight as to who he was as a young man.
But that was an original joke then.
Yeah. He might have coined the term 69. Then my jersey was my Big Mac jersey, and I wore it to the Winter Classic in Chicago, like right as kind of the renaissance of that franchise was happening, and they were playing Detroit. And after the game, I was at a bar with now my wife, at the time girlfriend, and Tony Esposito was there. He's doing like a meet and greet with some of the fans. And I was very well served at this point. And I went up, and I was a hockey goalie growing up, and it was kind of how I really identified. And I just went up to him. I was like, "Mr. Esposito, I just want to tell you, like, what you mean to me, and your story was always inspirational. And he was this rookie, he set the shutout record. I was just this awesome thing. And he, God bless him, he's passed away, but he, with being a generous human, and he was an amazing guy, he just pulled out a Sharpie and he signed my Big Mac jersey, which I would never have wanted him to do, because and I was speechless. And there's a photograph of the moment, and I'm tearing up, and my wife's like, my God, you can barely control yourself. I was like, you don't understand. He really fucked up one of my favorite things in life. Like, he should never have done that.
I mean, he just assumed, like, this kid definitely wants me to sign his jersey. Like,
yeah. He's heard my exact sob story about being a goalie and a brother. And he's heard that 59 million times. And it always ends with, can you please sign my shirt or my face?
I actually, I wanted to have you tell Jay this, because I had this in my notes to talk to you about, but you were a goalie, and I wanted to talk to you about spirit animals, because I know that both in your goaltending and then your acting work, you rely heavily on animal work, right? You study animals, and
my love life.
And your love life.
Yeah.
Well, with your growing up, your totem was the owl when you were a hockey goalie, and you had owls all over your bedroom, which drove me crazy. Because I would think it was so weird. It was like living next to like a serial killer.
Yeah, it was weird. It got a little out of control. The superstitions get a little out of control in the hockey world, in a lot of sporting world. I can't even think of, maybe golf has, but the hockey stuff gets nuts. There's all sorts of stories. I think it was like, what the hell was his name? Johnny Bauer. He couldn't pass a payphone without checking the change slot. So he had to plan out ways to get to the building where he didn't go through change slots. And I think Terry Sawchuk had to throw up before every game, like make himself go outside and throw up. And there was a lot of like, what skate goes on first, what pad, what number of hole you're putting on in the belt. So a lot of that is because I think for goalies, so much of the game is out of your control, and the game only really arrives to you when shit's hit the fan. So like, you try to, like, it's some illusion of control. I've obviously extensively talked with therapists about this. It's a little weird.
An owl though, is the owl it's certainly not a tough animal.
The neck. It's the ability to have the 360 neck. To be able to have your head on a swivel.
Both of you are wrong. So it's an extremely tough animal, Jay.
Okay.
Agree to disagree. Extremely tough. No, I don't. Why? That's a great question. By the way, I mean, I know it's a podcast, but my shrine just fell. But here is my goalie helmet. And this was a different animal. This is once I got to the men's league out here in Los Angeles. The owl, I had buried the owl my senior year of high school. So I went to Serpent out here because I was looking for a little bit more kind of flexibility, and I kind of had to figure out ways to get better. But the owl, I think, came from the fact that the owl sits back and it's hanging out, and then when it picks its moments, it's just, it's a killer. So I only then, though, senior year, found out that in many cultures, owls are signifiers of kind of death, or the transitioning to death and bad luck, which threw me for a loop. So I snuck out of, I went to a boarding school. I snuck out of my dorm.
I just let in 6 goals. Oh, damn. I picked the wrong animal.
Well, I would go to the games. I had a big plastic like barn owl, that you'd put in a barn to keep like other birds and rats out. I had one of those in the backpack, and I would make sure his head was sticking out. So like, we would walk into these rinks and I would have like my hockey bag on one shoulder and then this purple backpack because I also thought the color purple was really lucky, and with this owl sticking out. And I'm pretty sure every opposing player that we walked by was like, "What a fucking loser!" Oh,
just for the backpack color. I mean, just for the backpack color. And you had to have been nicknamed Owl, right? Or Hoop Man or something?
No.
None of it?
No one embraced it. Everyone just kind of was like,
"Great save, Hoot Man."
Whatever.
No, the crowd didn't hoot at you when you saved a puck.
He's got a 360 kick save, and the whole stadium goes, "Hoot!"
Well, keep in mind, at this point, I was also the backup goalie at this point. So there was no...
That's a lot of attention grabbing for a backup goalie there, pal.
There was no cheering when I made a save because I didn't make a save. I was working the door for the guys. But yeah, no, once I found out that they were like signifiers of death, I suppose I could have leaned into that and done like a Spider-Man Venom situation. I could have gone to but I didn't. I actually I had a lot of owl trinkets in my dorm room because I was at a boarding school. I took all the trinkets. I took the giant plastic owl. I snuck out of my dorm with my friend Chris, who was our number one defenseman, and we dug a hole in the middle of the football field, and I buried all these owl things. And I was like, no more owl. And then I took a Brillo pad to my goalie helmet and scrubbed off the owl paint job. It was a real...
And did it coincide with your desire to try popularity? I mean, is that why you got rid of all these owls?
Yeah.
Were you
figured I should
tired of getting your ass kicked in the locker room?
I figured I should try to talk to girls at some point. The owl was not helping me do that.
But you said earlier that you identified as a goalie, and it wasn't just a hockey goalie, because then in lacrosse, and I want to talk to you about when you played college lacrosse and how Coach Soul described you as the best locker room guy he's ever had, which was like a backhanded compliment, I think, in a lot of ways.
I took it as a compliment, no backhand, just straight up.
It was a compliment. But a lacrosse goalie, I think, is the most brutal position in all of sports because you have very minimal padding and you are stopping shots coming 80, hard rubber ball shots coming 80, 90 miles an hour with like your inner thigh. Yeah. And you would need to get into a headspace. So then at this point, you weren't using animal work anymore. Weren't you taking like 30 or 40 pills of Sudafed?
Yeah, I took 12 Sudafed before every game. So so what happened was
this
when
is
the hockey
why they
career,
had to start regulating it, Jay. This is why you can't get it on shelves anymore.
It's true. This is actually why they reformulated it and took epinephrine out of Sudafed because of guys like me. But truthfully, the end of my senior year of hockey, because that didn't work out, I was reading Sports Illustrated. There was an article. I remember the picture. It was like a black and white picture of a hand, and then in it were like 3 red Sudafed, and the title of the article was Hockey's Little Red Helper.
Hello.
And it was this article about how these guys were all popping Sudafed for this epinephrine rush. So I was going into my senior year, and the school I went to had a very competitive lacrosse team, and they'd essentially forgotten to get a lacrosse goalie. And so they kind of had wooed me in saying, well, it's very similar. And it's not, because you don't wear pads and it really hurts. And if you don't have any skill, your only ability to stop the ball is to put a piece of your body in front of it. Because I had no idea how to really do the stick.
There's all that
skills.
Bouncing and all that fucking, I mean, it's hard. Yeah. It's a hard position.
Yeah. So and then like essentially any hockey shot that you're going to face as a goalie comes off the ice. So you're looking at like, I mean, not to get too technical, but you're looking at like a 45-degree like window of where the shot can be generated from. And in lacrosse, it's infinite because it can come overhand, underhand, it can be bounced, it can come above you. So the whole situation's a goddamn nightmare. So I would take 10 Sudafed and essentially lose my mind. And I gave up on the animal work for lacrosse. And I can think back to 2 things. One, I used to envision flying around the campus like one of the characters in Lost Boys, and just
The Peter Pan version or the vampire movie?
The vampire movie. Well, remember, I was influenced by, remember Brian Cox, the linebacker for the Bears?
Yeah. He came up from the Jets.
He had some, yes, like Dolphins, Jets, Bears.
Yeah.
And he had some really fucked up shit that he would talk about to get himself psyched up for the game. So I never went quite as far as that, but I would envision like, I just get really hopped up on epinephrine, and then I would go out there and
you would envision the other teammates doing something horrible to your family members,
and then I would do something horrible to them.
In your mind.
Only in my mind. And I would be listening to Bush. They had a song called "Alien" that is just like a really slow doon 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 doon, and it just had all these weird sounds in it. So that was the beginning of a lacrosse career. What happened though, I got to college and I walked on. And
where'd you go to college?
To walk on, Dartmouth College.
Got it.
And to walk onto that team, there was like a 14-day window of walk-on tryouts. And so to get up for it, I had to take the Sudafed every day at that window. So 14 days in a row, and then I got like a headache for like 3 months, so I stopped.
Yeah, I mean the dose is 2. Right? That's what you're supposed to take too.
Yeah.
And you never, while you're playing lacrosse, decided to bring back the old owl?
No. Once his
brain was fried by that point, Jay.
Fried.
He'd forgotten his childhood. It was.
You know that
no room for the owl.
That it's in the Bible. It's illegal to boil owls. Like that's one of the things that'll send you to hell, boiling owls.
Really?
Yeah.
How do you know that?
Well,
why do you know that?
I was researching because I'm almost done with this novel I wrote, and there's a discussion of Christianity and whether or not that being gay is against the Bible. And so I looked up other things that are also in the Bible, and one of them is boiling owls. Not allowed.
That's so crazy. I played football in college, and there was, at the end of every year, there was Phil Soule, who was this incredible Maine football coach, just a fixture of both Bowdoin and the state of Maine. And he would award the boiled owl before we played Bates every year.
Going to hell.
And the reason he would give up, I never knew that was like a... But he would give it, and he said that the whole story and the point was he would give the boiled owl because it's the toughest thing in the world to eat.
An owl?
So he would give it a boiled owl specifically. So he would give it out every year. It was an honor to receive that.
So strange.
I didn't know.
It was an actual boiled owl?
No, he told the story of, he would have a story every year that he told about how once he tried it, he realized it was the toughest thing in the world. And then he would talk about the player that was being bestowed the boiled owl award.
I mean, again, there are a lot tougher animals than this owl, but okay, I get it. Tough to eat. I mean, that's not, that's.
Do you guys not identify in any way with like one animal more than another?
When I was a child, I would, yes, I would imagine myself as a Black Panther. As a child, because I was the fastest kid in the neighborhood, and in my grade school and in my high school, and I imagined myself as a Black Panther. But it really ended when I was like 7 or 8 or 9. I mean, that was over.
When's the last time you raced somebody?
Well, I tell people a lot how fast I am. So as you can imagine, people do want to race me, and I raced Steve Lemmy from Broken Lizard. And Steve Lemmy has just to be clear, I'm pro-vaccine, but he got the polio vaccine in the 70s in New York, and he got polio, and so he lost his entire right calf muscle is just a bone, and so he challenged me to race, and of course I naturally started attacking his bone polio leg and made fun of him and and this motherfucker smoked me, and I was like, what? Rematch. So then we rematched without shoes because I'm like, let's go grass, foot on grass. He beat me then too, And then he beat me on the street, and I'm like, wow, I'm the second fastest guy in Broken Lizard, and I lost to a fucking polio leg motherfucker. So I haven't raced anybody since. I don't know.
Yeah, that you might want to walk away.
But
on
you also said you have this animal thing in your lovemaking. Was that a joke, or is that sort of not a joke?
I think that's what Hayes was referring. No, I have a son who's every kid, to your previous point, is an animal lover, but he's to like a whole other level. And so, we do a lot of animal stuff in our house, and we talk a lot about, we take different animals with us into different situations. So whether it's, they have to make a presentation at school, it's kind of, it's something that I had learned because I don't do well in, not that they even happen all that much, but like those kind of work events, like premieres or upfronts or what's the big press day, like the TCAs, is.
Yeah.
So I was working once with like kind of a acting coach, Jean-Louis, and Jean was like, well, you have to bring an animal. Jean-Louis is right next to me in the garage, but he's camera shy. He doesn't want to go. He's my life coach.
Does he have a French accent?
No. He just wrote a book, Jean-Louis Rodri. But he was like, well, you have to bring an animal with you. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, just get the red carpet as an animal. Like, why would you go out there as yourself? So it doesn't mean like I'm literally walking out on all fours, but if I'm like, I'm going to do this one as a hyena or, whatever quality. So I went to like work in Albuquerque on something, and I went to, the zoo. It was in like November. There's an incredible zoo in Albuquerque. They have the largest collection of large cats, I think, in any North American zoo. It's you would not expect it. But there was not a single person in the zoo. Albuquerque is very cold in November and December. And I walked around and I was like trying to figure out like a way to approach this thing. And I was looking for an animal in that zoo. And then ironically, there was a peacock that was following me within like 2 feet the whole time, because I think it obviously wanted to be fed. So I didn't use the peacock though, because
that's the perfect the peacock. Oh, really? You didn't use the peacock to deal with press? Because I'd feel like that would be the perfect animal.
Just walk out with your arms. Sir, can you please step off the carpet?
Shimmy as you take all the pictures, just kind of.
That's like my nightmare. Anytime there's those press things, because I know at the end of the day, like, they're just gonna snap a picture or two because they're like, I don't know who this guy is. Just take a picture. Ace, do you remember when I came to visit you? You were living in LA, and we went to there was like a nightclub right next to the Laugh Factory, like right next to Greenblatt's. This was a long time ago, 15, 16 years ago. And we went in there, we were like hanging out and getting after it. And we walked out and there were all these paparazzi. And I remember when we walked out, you ripped my shirt open, and the paparazzi, like, he gears his camera up. And then I remember looking at him. He's a big guy, bald guy. And then I remember him looking like kind of disappointed that like, he's like, nah, they're not anybody. And I went right up and I licked him from the tip of his nose to the top of his forehead. And I remember him going, God damn it, do I wish you were important. He was very good sport about it.
It's embarrassing. Like when I directed the Dukes of Hazzard, Jessica Simpson was at her absolute blazing hot fucking peak. And at the LA premiere, there were people, everywhere, taking pictures everywhere. She came over to my house one evening, and we were just hanging out, getting hammered, and there was a guy in the bushes, and I had to go out there and chase him. But at the LA premiere, I remember I was on the red. I was a fucking director. I wrote the fucking movie, right? So I'm like somebody, and I'm standing on the fucking red carpet, and I'm being interviewed, and there are all these photographers on the to come. I'm still about to hit them, and she gets out of her limo, and this guy starts screaming at me, "Get the fuck out of the way!" And I'm like, me? What?
I wrote and directed this movie.
It's so embarrassing.
Yeah.
I'm the reason.
That's
I'm
my
the
nightmare.
reason we're here. There's no carpet. There's no carpet without me.
I know. It's so embarrassing. God.
Scott, was Jean-Louis the I remember you got a big role and your car had broken down and you needed a ride to your acting coach. I think your Prius was in the shop and I picked you up and I was driving you to work on some material with your coach. And, you know, I've known you your whole life, my whole life, except for a couple of years. And I figured we had like an open relationship where we could tell each other everything. And I asked you, what role are you, what project are you doing? What are you going? I mean, this must be important. You're working with a coach before you go down there. And you got really quiet and you looked out the window and kind of forlornly said, I can't talk about it. And I was like, what is it? I was like, what? And we actually got in a real argument in the car. And you're like, I can't discuss the project. I think it's because you had been scared so straight by all these legal confidentiality agreements that you had to sign.
Yeah.
But I don't give a shit about that because you're my brother and I wanted to ask what you were doing. And so then you said, well, we started playing this sick game where I was like, is it like a Marvel movie? Because is that why? And you were like, I just wanted to strangle you. Even telling the story infuriates me. You were like, no, but it is part of like a franchise that's. And I was like, what is it? Is it a superhero thing? You're like, no, not really, but it is. And
you were convinced that it was some sort of superhero situation because it's like playing 20 questions with my kids. It's like, does it live on land or water? I'm like, it lives on land. And then my daughter will be like, does it have gills? And I'll be like, no, I just said it lives on land. Hayes was like, is it Marvel? I'm like, it's not Marvel. He's like, can you fly? I'm like, no, I cannot fly. Is it based off a pre-existing IP that at one point was in a comic book? I'm like, no, Hayes, it's not Marvel. Okay, it lives on land. The guy lives on land. He doesn't have gills.
And it ended up being the El Camino, the Breaking Bad movie based on the series, and no one knew at that time that they were going to do that.
Well, look, to be fair, number one, as I'm getting older, I'm realizing I'm just like a pretty anxious human. I think we genetically get it. You don't seem to have gotten it as bad as I am. But so if someone says to me, hey, I'm going to tell you something, but you got to promise me you won't tell anyone, I prefer they not continue to speak. I prefer we just move on to something else.
I know.
I don't like that. I don't want to be, but if they do, maybe I'm eating a sandwich and I can't say, please don't tell me in the middle of a bite. And so they unload on me. I have this is basically sounds like a commercial for Tell Me Your Secrets, but it's not. But I just go lead trap. It's just not going to come back out of my mouth. And that way, if I ever catch wind of it some other way, I don't have to think like, oh, fuck, did that person hear that from me? Because the only person I told was Hayes, but then maybe like Hayes colored it in a way where he thought he was still protecting it to somebody else, but then they did. That just gives me so much anxiety. That particular project was the first one that I ever did, and still to this day, that secrecy around that thing was like so unbelievable that, first of all, I got the role. I had never read the script. Vince Gilligan wrote a set of dummy sides. That was one of the best scenes I'd ever read. I kind of wish he would make that show or movie because it was just an amazing, like 5-page scene. I went in and read that a bunch of times with casting. And then when I was allowed to read the script, I went over to his office and you checked everything in at the desk, phone, keys, everything. You went in, they handed you a paper script, you read it, and then you left it down on the table and you left. So I knew kind of nothing about that project. And so that is why, to go back to, I called Jean-Louis. I was like, I'm just going to build this guy around an animal because I didn't really have a lot of given circumstances. And so I drove out to the desert there's a wolf sanctuary out in the desert, and I spent this day with this wolf named Dakota. I wish I could remember, because people should go out there, because obviously they need all the support they can get. It's a wolf sanctuary. After like 5 hours with this wolf, I realized there's no way this character is a wolf. There's just too much. There's too much regalness to a wolf, too much wisdom. This guy was far more impulsive. So that I had to pivot off the wolf. But you got to spend time with the animal before you can figure that out, maybe.
Well, you had that impulse and you went down there, and I think you were maybe 40 or 50 pounds overweight, and you hadn't shaved in probably 5 years. And that was how you were going to approach the role. And then weren't you told to the character changed throughout the movie, and you had to shave?
Yeah.
And become,
it was horrible.
So you couldn't, that was like your cape, your Superman cape.
It was really fucked up, because we shot all this stuff with long hair and a beard. And then we finished that. And then Vince was like, he's like, all right, well, you're going to hair and makeup. We'll see you on the other side. And I went in, and I shaved my face. I wanted to keep some scruff or a mustache at least. Aha. See that? 22 minutes in, and folded it in there. But I really wanted to keep my mustache, because I'd had a mustache at that point for about 6 years of my normal life. And they were like, no, Vince wants everything gone. So I shaved to the skin my whole face for the first time in like maybe 6 or 7 years. And then they cut all my hair off. And I remember looking in the mirror and just freaking the fuck out. I first of all, my face is so fucking fat and gross looking. There's not a contour on my face. It's like a giant white balloon. And then I have this really short haircut. And I remember walking back, and then it was like, all right, let's go show everybody. And they were shooting something on stage, and I walking back, and I had this sheen, because as Hayes mentioned, I was I looked like a balloon that you could just pop with a pin. And I walked back onto set, and I remember him at the monitors turning around and just seeing 8 different thoughts register through his face. I've never spoken to him about this, but I just remember. And then finally what came out of his mouth was, wow, okay. Well, he's handsome. And then immediately looked and was nodding at the scripty, he's handsome. And the scripty going, sure.
We talked a little bit about your college career, and then we went into your professional career, but I want to there's a story that took place between those two things, where you were graduating school, and I had driven down to be at your graduation, and it's a big
exactly what you're gonna say.
It's a big step when you're when you're going through different phases of your life. Sometimes it's nice to check in and have some type of intentional plan. I've never been one to prescribe to that, but I know at the time you were graduating, and our dad was like, well, I got to talk to Scott about what he's going to do now after school. So I think he chose a moment maybe at 12:30 at night at a fraternity party to pull
Horrible
you outside.
Moment to choose. First of all, Hayes came to visit, because I was younger. So Hayes came to visit me twice in school, because he, at this point, was already living in LA, and LA to New Hampshire, it's not easy. Make it sound like we were in the 1850s. You can get scurvy in the wagon. That's a long wagon ride. But so the only other time he had come was we ended up in the attic of the house I was living in with 8 other people. And I remember they were at some other party, and they came home, and Hayes had a lampshade from an old Baker Square. Remember those restaurants?
Yeah.
Where they would hide the electrical cord on the lamp in a weird little copper chain fence type situation, chain. And so he was wearing the hat, the shade as a hat, and then he had this 8-foot copper chain sticking out of the top of it, which he was using a whip. And I was probably dressed like an idiot in some way. And these guys all came home, and he was just whipping the shit out of me with this chain. And they were just they just walked in. They were it was college and people are idiots, but they were just what the, and we were like fully committed to whatever roles we were playing. I think Hayes had some sort of gladiator game going on in his head. I don't know what it was, but so that was their one impression. Then to Hayes' story, it's like 12:30, night before I graduate. You know, everybody's there and celebrating with their parents. And my dad's like, hey, I got to talk to you. I need to talk to you. And I'm like, it's kind of a crazy
Hazer,
time.
I'm going to grab your brother for a second. Take him outside. Okay. We got to circle up the wagons here.
Okay. Hey, he's like, I think like the last thing he says is he's like walking outside. He like looks at Hayes, who's, probably wearing a keg as a hat at this point. He's like, Hayes, hold down the fort. Like, as though the 200 drunken people were going to like, I don't even know what it meant. Like, was he afraid of mutiny? Like, I just like, hold down the fort. So we go outside and he, I remember it takes him a second to figure out where his rental car is because he keeps hitting the button. And I can like clearly see the lights flashing. I'm like, Dad, you're over here to the right. He's like, no. I was pretty sure. Okay, I came up the drive. I'm like, Jesus Christ, it's flashing. He's like, oh, stand by. So we finally get in
after
the car.
6 hours of drinking with our dad. Jesus, this moment.
And we get in the car and he's like, I sit shotgun. He sits behind the steering wheel and he's like, so I want to talk to you about next steps. And I'm like, well, I think this night probably goes pretty late. And then it's just, every man for himself to get to the ceremony. And then I think, mom's there's a brunch at some. He's like, no. Big picture. Next steps. Like, what's the move here? What are we thinking about? And I'm like, now? Like, first of all, I've had this conversation with you, which is there are no next steps. There's no plan. But I'm like, Dad, this is kind of a weird time. I don't really know. And as I'm like, I don't even know. All of a sudden you just see like, from my point of view, a big thump and these 2 feet just dropping onto the hood of the car facing towards us. And I like, start at the feet and I just slowly pan up and it's Hayes. And he's just standing on the hood of this rental car and he's staring at the windshield through my father and I. And my father does not even turn his head. Maybe he like flips his eyes real quick, but he immediately knows it's Hayes. Right. And he's like, Scotty, look at me. I'm talking to you. And I'm like, he's definitely going to dent the hood of this car. He's like, I don't care. Talk to me. Next steps. I'm like, oh my God, he's taking off his pants. And Hayes is slowly taking off his pants. And without missing a beat, the windshield just starts getting covered in urine. So he's urinating on the windshield of the car. And I'll stay there. I'm like, oh my God, this guy's pissing all over the rental car. And my dad's still staring at me. He's like, focus. And he just takes his left hand and hits the wipers. And so now the wipers are just flipping the piss. His Hayes is like impossibly long urination. 12 minutes. As he said, we've been drinking for 6 hours. 12-minute piss. And it's just, and he's got him on the high speed. I think at one point he even hits the speed to escalate the situation. So now they're like, and he's like, focus. And I can't, I'm laughing. I'm both simultaneously thrilled and depressed at the current status of my life in that moment. Like,
I was trying to rescue you. I knew you were getting put on the hot seat for next steps. And I think in my unclear thinking, I needed to interrupt that moment and rescue you from having to answer these questions. So it was coming from a place of love.
If I did that with my father, he would never get over it for his whole life. I mean, he would doubt me. He would doubt everything about me and every decision I ever made again, as would I.
But, to our dad's credit, who was incredibly supportive and realizing that this was going to be any path to a artistic career is not linear. And Scott, after Dartmouth, decided to go. You got your master's in theater at the ART at Harvard, but then by virtue of that, ended up studying at the Moscow Arts Theater. He studied clowning in Moscow. This is probably Putin's second term.
Good relations back then. Good relations.
Early aughts. And he came to visit you over in Moscow, and you wearing leotards. So I mean, obviously the conversation in the car where I peed on the windshield didn't go great, because then he goes to see you 2 years later and you're wearing a leotard dancing around Moscow.
I am. What's funny is the day he came to ballet, was, we were studying ballet at the Bolshoi. It was like it was a real thing. It was an amazing experience. And I really got into the ballet part of it and realized in hindsight,
we'll talk about what is set, but set it up though. The Moscow Arts Theater is the most prestigious historical acting academy in the world, right? It's
certainly up there. It's the birthplace of modern drama. So Stanislavski and Chekhov, I believe, was a dentist, and Stanislavski, they were talking about how at that point, and like right around 1900, like theater sucked. If it was like, if your character was sad, you'd be like, I am sad. And you'd strike a posture that told the audience that character's sad because their hands are up, like pushing the sun away. And Chekhov was like, and it's crazy because, Shakespeare is like, I'm going to put on a mustache and fool my twin brother into thinking I'm just a man in the forest, and these guys were like, what the fuck? Like, this is not emblematic of anyone's life. And so, Chekhov was like, I want to see what it's like when two siblings are fighting, which is generally you sit in the room, you explode at each other, then you sit in silence for 5 minutes, and then you scream more at each other. And Stanislavski was like, it's a famous story. I think they sat with coffee for 26 hours or something. And Stanislavski was like, yes, and I want to see when someone's sad, I want to see someone be sad. I don't want to see them tell me. So it was the difference between presentational and representational theater. And that was kind of the birthplace of it. They created, the repertory company in which you would be performing like 3 different shows throughout the week. You'd have a company, and each night a different person would play a different role, in terms of scale. And you really just became a place then where you would bring up your young actors to develop them, very similar to how our sports are. You would develop them in your farm system so that they would graduate into the company. And so
all in English, right?
No. So when we were over there, we had these kids called angels, which were translators. They were like dramaturgs, or, they were involved in theater education in some other capacity. They weren't performers, but they wanted to either be, directors or dramaturgs, which is like the chief researcher of any theatrical production. So we each got assigned an angel, and then they would translate. But, the language barrier, you quickly kind of, oddly, you get over. I mean, some of the words become obviously repeated a lot when you're getting directed by someone in a different language. But you just kind of sync up. It was like a intellectual syncing.
They would interpret what the professors were saying to you. These like very stern Russian professors would be talking to you and Sean Simbro, like these 2 kids coming from an American comedy background who had done Improv Olympic in Chicago, and now they're over in Russia. And the angel would say, he's very disappointed in your posture. You have no integrity in your spine.
Yeah. Yeah. It would be like, you'd be like rehearsing, and then it'd be like, yeah. And they're like, it's no. So you're like, oh, fuck. And the guy would like get up and he'd be like, and then the angel would just turn to you and be like, you must do this better. And then it would be like, it's so passionate. It was an incredible experience. But it would be so passionate. And then, the translation was always so much shorter, but you would get the passion. So it almost worked. I remember when our dad was there and he came to the ballet class, the woman who was teaching us ballet was the prima ballerina at the Bolshoi for decades and decades. At this point, she was probably 75. And I kind of like went over there, very open to it, but I was like a little bit more from like, just a collegiate athletic background. So I was like, kind of like, a little thicker and, on the street, I'm not big, but in the theater world, I'm a little bigger than some of the other guys. So it was kind of this like project for some of these like ballet teachers, like, oh, look at this, thick piece of jerky, like, let's see if we can bend them. And
I have to make this piece of marble into a ballerina.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the stone will become paper mache in my hands. And so that was always kind of fun.
He thinks he's a fucking owl.
Yeah. Although, do you know if I said, how do you do a bird with your hands? Like, how would you do a bird? Like, you kind of put your thumbs together and flap your fingers out to the side, right?
Like,
maybe.
Sure.
Jay shrugged.
I wouldn't. Yeah, I could figure it out.
Well, I met when we were there, or right after, I met Marcel and I said, bird. And he put his two hands on top of each other, the palm against the back of his hand. He stuck his thumbs out and he just undulated his hands.
Oh.
Like that.
That's a better bird.
Wow.
That's a better bird.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Again, it's a listening medium, but it's But the woman did come up. Larissa came up. I think it was Larissa. She came up. Maybe it was Irina. They're oddly not that. The name bank in Russia gets pretty small, and she came up to my angel, who was named Sasha, and she was like, and she like gave this long thing, and my dad was standing next to me. Now, of course, he has a phonetics problem, and he's claims he's dyslexic, and he very well might be, and so like foreign languages, forget it. Like his mind is like melting by the second as he's overhearing two people speak Russian, and then the angel turns and goes, Irina says you must to dance every day like your father is watching. And I'm like, okay. And I turn and look up and my dad's immediately crying. And he goes, I am, son. I am. It's like, what? Like, I mean, it's really like dance like no one's watching. And I got the note to dance like your father's watching.
Do you think he was crying because of what a horrible mistake he had made by raising us? And he's like, what am I doing?
I mean, it's pretty tricky.
Or was he moved by your performance? He's like, how did they end up here?
Yeah. He's sitting there. He's like, yeah, he's in a ballet studio in Russia. He's looking at his son in a unitard.
But Dad did. I remember he saved your ass before you went over there because he gave you. He said, if anything goes wrong while you're over there, because Russia's a dangerous place, call this guy. This is your contact. And I remember you had a gun stuck in your face by one of the Moscow police officers.
Yeah.
And you called Tretiak, right? Wasn't the...
Yeah, through a work relationship. He had Tretiak is Vladislav Tretiak. There's a poster of him in the back corner of this garage, but he's essentially the Michael Jordan of Russia. And
as a hockey player.
Okay.
As a hockey player. He was the goalie, so he won countless gold medals. He was the goalie of the 80 team that we beat. Wow. But, from the Russian perspective, that's like a blip in his career. Uh-huh. That's a missed final shot. The rest of it is world championships, gold medals, one of the greats ever, revolutionized the position, so forth. So he did. He made that connection. I was hesitant, and when I was going over, was not necessarily planning on reaching out to him, but that was thwarted when we landed in Moscow. I was one of the last guys off the plane, and one of my classmates, James T. Alford, he came like running back onto the plane, and he was like, yo, there's a motherfucker out there with a machine gun asking people if they're Scott MacArthur. And I was like, oh man. So I got off the plane, and he was a credentialed soldier, and he like kind of ushered me off to this room, and that's where I met Tretiak. He had come to the airport to meet me, and the Moscow airport, from what I can remember, it's not like landing at O'Hare and like there's a bunch of options to get around. Like you land there, the cabs are not to be taken. The gypsy cab situation is what you ultimately in Moscow, at least then, you took gypsy cabs, which were basically Uber without the app. You just flagged down a car, and the person in Russian would ask where you're going, and you'd have a broken way of telling them, and then you'd get in and you'd like barter the fare, and it would just be a guy like going on his way to work or something. Or I remember one time getting in, and a woman had like 8 cats sitting shotgun. She just had all these cats in her, like Dotson, or like the Russian equivalent. But so Tretiak gave me his card, and I remember through a translator, he said, when you get in trouble. And I made the joke to the translator. I was like, when or if? And the translator was like, and Tretiak was like, and he was like, when? And I was like, oh shit. And then like a couple months later, I was out with some people in the theater company and other Americans, and the South African really beautiful gal named Taniqua, who's like 6 feet tall with blonde hair. And she was like, you know, dancing in the rain on the streets at like 3 a.m. or 4 a.m., maybe even 5 a.m. The sun was up. So it was like 5 or 6 a.m. And we'd been out like all night. There was like 5 of us. And this van pulled over and these guys got out. And, it, you know, it's just one of those things, show me your papers. And then you're trying to show papers and these papers aren't good enough. But again, all really like strained communication because they're speaking Russian. The alphabet's Cyrillic. So you don't even identify a lot of the characters you're looking at. And yeah, that was a tricky situation because there were guns and they're trying to check your pockets. And so here's the public service announcement. When you're in a foreign country, do not let anyone check your pockets because they're probably going to put something in your pocket and then pull it out. And then everyone around is going to be like, I did see him pull that out of his pocket.
Yep.
So I'm, you know, and then, and Hayes knows this, but you can't put your hand in my pocket. And Jade, that you did try to do that the first time I met you at that.
And you were very reactive. I was like, whoa, that's kind of
I said, Jay,
that's my first move. And then, you know, I was going to plant some H on you and then that was not possible.
Yeah. You're like, hey man, my hand is so cold. Can I just get a pocket real quick? I was like, no.
But you had to use Tretiak's connection to get out of that.
Yes, I had to call him, and then he spoke to like the head officer, and then the head officer was not pleased that I somehow had Tretiak, thankfully, in my phone. I had a little Jason Bourne burner phone that I got over there, and it was like the only number.
You called him at 5 a.m?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, he said when.
Yeah.
When you get in trouble. But it was awesome over there. And you know, to your point, the Putin thing, I remember when I was there, it was the 60th anniversary of May Day. It was pouring rain, and pretty much all the world leaders were meeting in Red Square to commemorate the victory of World War II. And keep in mind, like Russia lost 23 million people in World War II. So like everyone, you know, made tremendous sacrifices as 3 actors are sitting on a Zoom talking about this, but
we're not the greatest generation. Shooting the shit and zooming.
Just completely unqualified talking about some situation that it's the 60th anniversary. Could barely remember it. As I say it, I'm pretty sure it's probably.
I was like, you were like May Day. I'm like, yeah, May Day. That was a big one. What the fuck was May Day?
I know. And then I'm trying to do the math as I'm speaking. I'm like, was it 50, 60, 40? Fuck. When did it end? When was it? But anyway, each world leader, like their limo would pull up on the perimeter of the square, Putin standing in the middle, and they'd get out and like, you know, all these, everyone would have umbrellas, and then they'd like walk to the square. And I remember in my mind, I'm sure you can look this up, so it might not be true, but in my mind, it's true. And it's really cool because I remember that George W. Bush was our president. He got out and he like declined the umbrella. So he like walked out into Red Square, like in a long, you know, black raincoat, but he's like getting pouring rain. And as he's approaching with no umbrella, I remember like Putin like signaling, and then they put down their umbrellas so that when the two of them shook hands, it's like they're getting, and I remember thinking like, oh fuck, like this is like, there's no post Cold War here. Like this is still going, and you know, and then of course, obviously the Bushes and Putins, you know, very well documented, are not fond of each other. But
that's right.
It's a power.
He said he saw evil in his eyes. That's what Bush said about him.
I saw evil in the man's eyes.
The Chandrasekhar family also doesn't use umbrellas, but it's true. Like my mother would never allow umbrellas at the house. And she's like, you can't have umbrellas. She goes, because the rain is as good as the sun. And so just be out there and be there. And so I'd walk around. I would walk to like interviews in New York in suits, just fucking drenched, because I'm like, I'm not using an umbrella. I'm not doing it. I still don't
Do
do
you
it.
use one
No,
now?
I will not. I will not.
Yeah. You know what? I dig that. I used to say I don't believe in umbrellas. I remember my friend being like, they're not a belief system. I was like, yeah, they are, man. It's a bigger and I used one in New York 2 weeks ago. It was pouring rain, and I used one, and I felt like such a fucking phony walking down the street with an umbrella.
My God. I would never do that. I would allow if I'm in wardrobe and I'm waiting to shoot, I'll allow someone else to hold an umbrella over me, but I will not hold that umbrella. And if they don't want to hold the umbrella, that's okay. That's okay. I'm just going to be there.
That's it. Because I remember somebody offering an umbrella, and I was like, no, I'm good. I can walk over there. And they're like, it's not really about you. It's about all the people whose work is on you. Your makeup, your hair, your wardrobe.
Right. Right.
No one cares if you're tough or have some stupid ass belief system in umbrellas, dude. Like, we're just trying to get through the fucking day and go home. So could you please let me hold this umbrella over you, you ungrateful piece of shit.
So we don't have to wait a half hour to blow dry your hair.
Why are we waiting? Well, Scott doesn't believe in umbrellas. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Can you, I heard you're in this movie, No Hard Feelings.
I am in this movie, No Hard Feelings. I hope. I made the trailer, so I'm confident I'm not fully cut out. So that's good.
That's not necessarily an indicator as to whether you're in the movie. Like when we make trailers in Broken Lizard, we're like, just use the best shit. And then you call the actor and be like, by the way, it just, you know how editing goes. And then, it's I just want you to.
Yeah, well, my anxiety, literally my hands just start sweating. But I guess it doesn't matter if you're in it or out. I mean, you already did it.
I mean, do
right?
you watch your movies when you're done?
I never used to. And then while I was working on a show, and the guys who were creating it they were like, listen, man, like, we get it or we don't. Who gives a shit? Either way, you got to watch some of this stuff because we want to make an adjustment here. And it was really helpful.
Oh.
So, I kind of will, truthfully, I will fast forward through my shit just because you just get self-conscious, the plate face, the refrigerator body. It just doesn't. And then, but I'll watch the movie because I always want to know like how they captured the thing that I wasn't around for, when they shot it. I'm really curious about that. And I like that.
Well, the movie No Hard Feelings, I know just from the trailer, because again, you don't talk to me about the projects that you're working on, so I had no idea that you were doing it. But I think the premise is an older woman being paired up with a boy to, like, I don't know, to make him cool or to sexualize him in some way. The premise of the movie, but I'm not. Tell me a little bit about that.
Jennifer Lawrence is in this movie?
Yeah. So Jennifer Lawrence plays a down and out kind of townie who lives born and raised in Montauk. And she responds to an ad in Craigslist for a woman to date a 18-year-old kid the summer before he goes to college. The parents have put the ad in there. And if she can successfully date him, and there's a lot of fun with what does date mean in the movie, she will receive an old Buick in exchange for her services. And she needs a Buick because her primary source of income is Uber driving. So it's, it's a coming of age tale set throughout that summer of her trying to quote unquote date this kid and just kind of what happens in their relationship. And it's awesome. It feels like in all the right ways, like a throwback movie that like we would have watched, when we were growing up or even in the 90s.
Yeah, I know that writer, John Phillips, and Gene Stupnitsky's the director, right?
Yeah, they wrote it together.
Right. Got it. John is a real believer. There's some of us who are really eagerly trying to bring back the R-rated theatrical comedy, or just the R-rated comedy, really. I mean, I don't know who made this movie, but he and I talk a lot about that.
Yeah, and he's I've read other things he'd written, and I had met him years and years ago, so it was fun to kind of finally get to make something together.
I wanted to talk because I know we all share a deep love for Chicago sports and the Chicago Cubs in particular. I was telling Jay about this earlier. because I'm still waiting for the documentary to come out. Because you went to, I told Jay 32 straight Cubs games, home and away. Is that the right number?
I think it was like 27, and then we broke it by like a game or two. I think it got up to like 32 or 33.
Including a game in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, went down to Puerto Rico. That's when the Expos were kicked out of Montreal. They were playing in San Juan, Puerto Rico at Hiram Patron Stadium. And it was a bit of a throwback because I would wear I actually have them right here still.
Well, wait, but
I would wear
just to be
Sony
clear,
headphones.
You told everyone you were going to 29 or 32 straight Cub games and getting hammered, and you told everyone you were making a documentary on the Cubs.
Both things can be true at once.
I'd like to see that documentary. Do you have?
I would too, because it was 2003, so something was happening. The team was really good, and it wasn't. It was the first real. We had the prior Kerry Wood lineup was going.
Yep. Zambrano.
And Zambrano was there, and we saw him. Did he pitch the game? No, the guy we saw pitch, I can't remember number 5 in the rotation, but he pitched the Puerto Rico game. We started going to these games. I had a shattered leg that I had broken, and so I was basically on the lam. Is that the right use of that, or does that mean I'm hiding out?
It means you're hiding out from the
that
law.
means you're running.
But
close.
both can be true. Both can be true.
Yeah. Maybe I was. Maybe I was at the time. I don't know. It was an interesting time. So I had this broken leg. I was recovering from that, and I was taking classes at Second City and Improv Olympic, and I was delivering catering food for Lalo's Mexican restaurant, which took over the old Michael Jordan Steakhouse. And I kind of got backdoored into doing some ticket type stuff for Cub games. And it was that summer, and the games started getting increasingly difficult to get into. So we would, we'd get a bunch of tickets and we'd sell a bunch. And basically it was like slinging weed in college, right? Which was like, you wouldn't do it to make money. You would just do it so you didn't have to pay for your own weed if you wanted to. So by nature of that, my friend Jason and I started going to these games, and it was I think the beginning of it was a 4-game homestand against the Cardinals at the beginning of like August or maybe mid-August, which the Cubs swept, which then popped them into playoff contention. And from there, it was like at first it was like very accessible. The games were like Milwaukee, Cincinnati, like all this shit you could drive to, and then Puerto Rico came up. So I was like, well, we got to do that. And we flew down there, and we saw every bit of San Juan. The couple nights we were there, we saw the shadows, and we got out of there immediately. It's a tricky time, but the way we could really get it, because we got into the dugout down in Puerto Rico, was we had like an old VHS-C camcorder, and we put a, well, you would know more, not like a matte box, but like not a hi-hat, but like a lens adapter thing that made it look real, And so if you wore headphones and you carried this camera around, you could basically say you were press. And it wasn't even that long ago, but you realize, like, in today's world, you can never do that, right? You get near the dugout, it's like, get the hell away from us. And then we could like get in, and we could get into like VIP lounges. We could get into like where the players were staying. So we have all this amazing footage, and we went up through when they got knocked out, and we were in the streets. We interviewed, what's the Sports Center guy's name? Carl Ravitch. Is that his name? Carl Ravitch.
Yeah. I think so.
Was he an anchor?
Carl Ravitch is either a Sports Center anchor or a guy I met on the road one time at a bar. Ravitch. My name's Carl, but you can call me Ravitch. Why do they call you Ravitch? Well, because it's my last name. Oh, okay. Dealer's choice. Carl or Ravitch. Yeah, just no R. Or, I said. So, yeah, I've never compiled that footage. I still have it. And I do think, well, it would be the 20th anniversary. So maybe that's what I'll do for this summer.
That's when you should release it.
It was.
I can't imagine
it felt
it's
like
technically
when they
well
got
done.
it. No, it's technically it probably looks like the Blair Witch Project, and it's just two doughy ass dudes drinking beers at Cubs games, and like it'd be like the fifth inning, and Jay would be like, my friend Jason would be like, my nickname was Guapo, and he'd be like, Guaps, Guapo, what are you thinking? I'm like, fired up. And then like we'd always sit on the third base side, and then he'd like turn the camcorder on, and I'd be like, all right, we got bottom of the fifth. Cubs are down by 2. Sosa looks off. What do you think, Jay? And he'd be like, oh, yeah. And then he'd like hand the camcorder to me, and then I'd turn it around. And then someone behind us would be like, could you guys shut the fuck up, please? Like, we're trying to watch the game. And then we'd like turn it to him and be like, get the fucking camera out of my face, dude. Like, it was all that. It was messy. And yeah. You know, that tape has probably been eaten by termites or something.
I think it was VHS.
I have an unfinished Willie Nelson documentary. After Dukes of Hazzard, I asked him if I could shoot a documentary on him, and he goes, yeah, sure. And so I shot 2 shows at the Beacon Theater in like, had to be 95. And then we wired the bus with 6 cameras and just shot 2 nights at the Beacon of people getting on and off and smoking weed without really telling them that the cameras were kind of hidden. And, you know, I remember like standing on the fucking outside the bus, and Willie and I were really close. We're close friends. We're still close friends. But I was standing on the outside on like 80 whatever street with a camera as Joe Pesci got off the bus, and you know, he was famous, so we were filming him, and he goes, what the fuck are you doing? Turn that fucking thing off! And I was like, what? I'm like, no, I'm friends with, get the fuck out of here! And so we have that footage. We have that footage too. And then Willie came to me, and he goes, and I mean, I probably sunk 80 grand into this already. And he's like, I don't want to do no documentary. And I'm like, you know, he goes, yeah, it's just going to be fucking, you know, it was put it on my gravesite. Who needs that? I'm still living. And I'm like, all right, I guess we're done. And that was it. And then I put it in storage, and now I can't fucking find it. I mean, it's somewhere in storage. And,
you know what I just thought of? You know, in My Cousin Vinny, when Joe Pesci's walking across the street, and like there's a guy from earlier in the movie that chirps him, and he's just walking, and he does this punch where he like jumps to his left, but he punches with his right hand, and he knocks the guy out. I'm just imagining you walking by Pesci one day in LA and him just fucking jacking you in the face. I told you to turn the fucking thing on. The camera thing, like the camera thing in today's world is like a mind fuck. Like there's just everything you're doing is on camera.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah.
Do you think you get to a point, like, do you think our kids, you know, like everyone's like, oh, well, by the time they're adults, no one will even care, right? Like, do you think that is true? Or do you think it's always going to be gotcha stuff that, like, are we just in a gotcha place for the rest of
I
human
think
existence?
the problem is those hidden cameras in the glasses. You know, those ones that you just put a pair of glasses on and it's shooting out of the middle of it. Like that.
Right.
I mean, that's a real problem. I mean, that's a real problem. I'm against all that. And nobody really behaves the same way when a camera's on. It's too bad. That's all just too bad.
Well, isn't there, what's that principle in nature? What is it's the hurt? It starts with an H. Like if you put a camera near an animal, it will inherently sense that it is being watched, and hence you can never truly observe. It's not Heisenberg.
It does begin with an H, though, right? Doesn't it?
It does. He's very good with H words. He's always been very good with H words. I think it's part
well,
of
he
his
went to
main
Bowdoin.
thing.
I mean, after all,
Bowdoin. But there is there's that philosophical argument, like what it's like to be a bat. Like you can only know what
it's the principle is when something's being watched changes the something.
Yes. Like if you are even in the presence of an electron, it changes the path of an electron. That could be totally not true, but I'm going to say it like I definitively know it is true. So Yeah, I agree with you. All of a sudden,
As
like,
an actor,
everybody-
I have to really trust you on this because you're an actor, so it must be right.
Yeah. And if there's a reference to it in an audition scene, I've probably looked it up enough to be able to say the word correctly, but I will then say, well, I did a thing one time about that, and I just leave it at that. And people are like, wow, man, this guy works a lot. It's like, no, just auditions a lot.
I did see
Did some
Pesci again,
documentary work.
and this was about 3 or 4 months ago. I was playing golf at Lakeside Country Club, and he was just driving around in a golf cart, and I hit him. I mean, he didn't recognize me. I hit a drive. He goes, "Oh, you call that a golf swing?" And then he just fucking kind of just tootled off and drove away. And he's just making fun of people out there. He just drives around making fun of people. And you're like, that's so wonderfully Los Angeles.
I just watched Goodfellas. I was stuck in a hotel room and watched it again. And I didn't realize that the kid he shoots when he's like, how am I funny to you? Am I a clown? Do I make you laugh? The kid he shoots is Christopher from The Sopranos. It's Michael Imperioli. Yeah. I never realized there's so much DNA there, obviously. Who would have thought the most famous mob movie gave DNA to the most famous television show about the mob? I never would have put that together.
He played Spider.
Jay, what this? I was telling Scotty a little bit about Vouch Vault. Can you describe what? There's the origin of why you came up with it and what's going on.
So it came about when Super Troopers got a 35% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes from 100 critics. Now, from 250,000 fans, it has a 90% fresh rating. But this 35% fresh rating was then repeated on Beer Fest. And God, I don't even think Club Dread is much out of the mid-20s. And I'm like, who the fuck are these guys? Like, who are our reviewers? They're just strangers. Do they smoke weed? Where do they go to school? Do they like R-rated movies? Clearly not, right? And I'm like, I need to build a revenge machine against these motherfuckers, against Rotten Tomatoes in particular. So I got together with these two guys, Eric Colbert and Eli Saz, and we built this thing called Vouch Vault. It's an app. And it basically is like the Instagram of recommendations is the idea. So if you follow me, you'll see that I like Goodfellas, and you see that I like the show Blackbird, and you see that I like, that Zoe, anyway, some band, right?
Kravitz.
Now I was thinking of the new girl, my friend.
Deschanel.
Yeah. She had a band with M. Ward. Him and her. Yeah, him and her. I love that. And then clearly I love it. And then like, a sushi restaurant down the road, or anything you love, you can put on there, and then you can trust the recommendation because you know who gave it to you. As opposed to A.O. Scott from the fucking New York Times, who didn't like Super Troopers. Motherfucker.
Not that I remember.
Can you vouch for people? Could I vouch for Hayes?
Yes, you can. You can. Like I've vouched for stand-ups, and I've vouched for funny videos on YouTube. So I don't think anyone's ever vouched for a person, but there's nothing stopping you. All you have to do is put up a picture of him and then describe why you like him. Then you're supposed to put a link as to where to find him. But I mean, you know where he lives. You can go see him. So I'm going to vouch for this book called Sapiens. Have you read that book, Scott?
My wife read it and then told me about it. So I would, if I didn't know you this well, I would say, yeah, no, I read it, but I have not read it.
That's funny because Hayes described a book to me recently, and then I asked him a follow-up question, and then he goes, actually, my wife read it. I didn't actually read it, but she told me these things about it, and I'm like, I mean, you guys went to Harvard and Bowdoin, or Dartmouth and Bowdoin. I mean, what are you legacy guys?
You learn how to not read books and talk about them.
Well, Sapiens is this incredible book by this Israeli author, and it's just about like how humans became.
Is it Noah Harari?
Yeah, Noah Harari, and it's just how humans became the most dominant of this fucking thing. became the most sort of, there were,
How humans develop tools like this drill.
well, like that drill, why they developed religion and money, and it's all about being a human and the history of our species, and how there were like 5 other humanoid type species that we basically hunted down and killed, like the Neanderthals, and like we were all eventually our brains were a little bigger, so we were a little smarter, and we developed the tools to kill them all.
Does it get into consciousness?
It doesn't really, I wouldn't say, but there's another book after that called Homo Deus, which gets into a little bit of AI and the next, and medicine and the desire for humans to live forever and taking brains out, and that book is equally great. But anyway, Sapiens.
Yeah, well, I'm going to vouch, first and foremost, I'm going to vouch for animals, because I feel like that it's become apparent to me that some people think animal work is not necessary, but I do think it's very important. I watched the movie Air over the weekend, directed by Ben Affleck, starring Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. I feel like these guys need a shout out and some help. So I'm going to go ahead and vouch for them. No, I thought that movie was awesome. I mean, it's a lot of scenes with 2 people talking, and I thought it just moved along. The soundtrack is killer. Maybe I'm slightly biased because grew up in Chicago during the Jordan era and remember the day the Jordans dropped. And I thought it was really well done. I thought it's just a very cool movie. It feels like kind of a throwback movie. I thought everybody in it was really fun and cool, and I'm glad I spent my 2 hours on Saturday night watching that.
It's funny, I haven't seen that movie yet, because I was like, who the fuck are these Boston guys think they are making a movie about Michael Jordan's shoe? And so I'm really like tribal and like, fuck off. But everyone keeps telling me it's great. So I'm like, I think I'm gonna, now that you vouch for it, I think I'm gonna.
It's really incredible. The 3 of us having grown up in Chicago during that era, when you realize like the NBA was not a global sport. Didn't have that much attention on it. And Chicago as well didn't really have a lot of eyes on it. But Michael Jordan and Chicago were like the global center of the attention of the world when we were there. And it just happened to be, we were part of it and got to witness all that. It happened in our town. I think that's the cool part about it, how much he changed everything, sports and ownership. The thing about that movie, Scott, it's interesting you mentioned it, because they made the movie with, we might have been talking about this the other day, with Artist Equity, the studio that made it, which is, I guess, a business model where that those guys put together, where people participating in the movie get paid. The crew, the cinematographers, and their compensation is based on the performance of the movie, which is awesome. And then also the fact that the first movie they did under this banner was about a guy who wanted equity participation in his shoe company. So instead of just licensing his name and getting a check for calling it the Air Jordan, the story of Air is really Jordan saying, I want to own a piece of the shoe, when he was like 20 years old. And it changed the whole trajectory of, Nike and the NBA and
of like Jordan. Almost everything, really. Like when you even pull it out, like it just changed the way corporations now, and then here you are 85 to 2005, 10, 20, 30 years later, like, it's all branding, right? And just Instagram and like where we are. But it was really the first domino to fall, and, people getting a cut of using their likeness. And then I didn't even realize, and it's an epithet at the end, I don't know if that's the right use of that word, but if at the end of the movie where like Sonny Vaccaro plays a big role in NCAA athletes getting paid.
Right.
And then
that was
Yeah,
they
it's
made all the
amazing that
video
the highest paid college athlete is this gymnast. Have you followed this whole thing?
No.
Are you talking about currently?
Yeah,
right now with the new rules.
Yeah, she's not even the best in the country, from what I understand, but she's really beautiful. She has like a great Instagram account, I guess. Just, it's amazing because we had this exact conversation after we watched the movie. Like, now what are you rewarding? Like, you rewarded Jordan's excellence, right? Or they bet on his excellence. But eventually it just defaults into like, we always somehow reduce it to like sex and power and, I don't know where we got from there. The movie's awesome.
Yeah, that's part of it. That the USC quarterback, I think, got paid $10 million last year. How does that work in a college team? Yeah, how does it work when I don't know if that's true. Maybe I think I heard that somewhere, but how does that work with your linemen, and what's that huddle situation like when does it get shared? I mean, you're rewarding a guy in college who's 18, 19 years old, who's totally dependent on guys blocking for him and guys catching the ball for him, the pay disparity is huge.
Well, I mean, you were a college quarterback. Like, did you hook up with a bunch of chicks one weekend and then go to practice on Monday and blow all of your linemen as a thank you for what they
I don't know how we got there from that, but I did buy ice cream sandwiches for my linemen on film night on Thursday nights when they would do film. I would stop by the film session and I would bring them ice cream sandwiches and 2-liter bottles of Coca-Cola, and just as we weren't getting paid,
thick.
but
keep them thick
so they could enjoy the film session.
Hazer, you want to sit down and watch some film? No, guys, I'm gonna go hook up with a chick that you guys have afforded me the luxury of doing. Enjoy your ice cream sandwiches.
I am vouching for. So my friend Michael Voltaggio, who is an incredibly talented guy, you know me. I hate to even limit him to this title, but he won Top Chef. He's a restaurateur. He's a chef. He's a thinker. His stories are incredible. He's just he's a brother. He's an amazing dude, and he sends me stuff from time to time. And he sent me this cleaver. You guys see the heft and the weight of this cooking cleaver? I mean, sorry, it just scared this out of my dog. But it's a company called Messermeister. It's a female-owned knife company in Ojai. I've never used a cleaver before. I didn't know how I would. I've used this thing more in the last 2 weeks from cutting pizzas. I just slam it on the table, instead of using a pizza cutter. I've used it for everything. I never knew I needed a cleaver, but this one weighs about, it's got the heft of a 5-pound weight, and I'm into it right now.
What's the brand? What's the brand of it?
It's Messermeister, and they're made in Germany, but this company is, this thing is, it's got some real heft to it.
I'm going to get a cleaver.
You need it. You don't know how much you need a cleaver until you have one.
I'm going to get that cleaver.
Cleaver.
I don't know that I need a cleaver, but I think I might now that I hear your story about this.
Well, Michael sent it to me, and I was like, how do I use this? I want to put it to use. And
you're generally using it to cut through things that any other knife can't, right? Like you're beheading something.
I haven't used the knife with weight, where the weight is the thing that makes it cut.
Yeah, because you probably haven't cut anything that necessitated the weight. Cut it.
Beheading something.
Well, like fish.
Yeah.
This would cut through boiled owl. I know that. I could hack off.
That's pretty tough.
A
That's a pretty tough animal.
Pretty tough.
The owl's really taking it on the chin in this podcast. Interesting note, owls do have chins, despite popular belief that their neck and head are the same. They're not. It just looks that way.
You would know.
I would.
Yeah. All right. Dude. Well, that was fun.
I think Scott has been our first guest who actually has a mustache, Jay.
I know, but you don't having a beard does not mean you have a mustache. If you have anything here, right, you don't actually have a mustache.
I currently have a beard for a project I can't tell you about.
You have facial hair until Vince Gilligan tells you don't anymore.
If I have facial hair, first of all, this is a terrible beard. And you know what really sucks about this beard is Hayes' wife, my sister-in-law, going on knowing her for, I don't know how long. He's like 17 years, 18 years.
Yeah, sure.
My beard does not grow in like underneath my lip.
You have
and
a
then
bald spot on it.
Yeah, like big bald spot here. And then it doesn't connect. So I can't grow a goatee or anything. And Allie asked me like, not but a year ago, she goes, don't you get tired of shaving the same spot like every morning? And I was like, what? And she's like, you keep it so close to the skin. I've never seen you get scruff there. She's like, it's just kind of a weird look though. And I was like, you fucking think I grow my beard like this consciously? This is not a choice, Allie. This is how my beard grows in.
I just don't get hair in that area like Mercedes likes it.
I'll tell you the power of the mustache. I had a beard like 8 years ago. I shaved it into a mustache to do like a short film with my friend to play a cop, probably inspired by your work of Super Troopers.
Thank you.
And
lawsuit.
And
be careful.
And then
Jay's gonna want back end on that short.
And then my wife was pregnant, and her breasts had grown considerably during the pregnancy. And there was this bit where she kept saying, like, this is
the lotion.
There's the lotion. God, I wish the listeners could see. He's oddly, he's covered his entire face in the Cetaphil. I don't know how this man pleasures himself.
Walk us through that the breast evolution. Was that in the book Sapiens?
Yeah. Go on. You were talking about your wife's breast. Go on.
Pregnancy.
Go on.
It's like 4 or 5 months ago, I blew my knee out having sex with my wife, and I call Hayes. I'm like, I blew my knee out. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I got to get surgery. They got to fix my knee. Like, they got to go in there. It's all fucked up. I can't move it. He's like, Jesus, dude, how'd you do that? I was like, well, to be honest, Kate and I were having sex. And he's like, what position? And I was like, I can't tell you that.
Which is a fair question. I wanted to know the move of how you would literally do something that would hurt your knee enough where you have to get surgery. So I asked him, what position was he in when it happened? Scotty took it as like a question of me trying to visualize him.
You would have visualized if I give
by
you the
default,
position,
but not intentionally. It wasn't like
I just don't need to think of my brother visualizing my wife in
I
any
would have
position
thought
other
of
than
you,
like
not my
helping him
sister-in-law.
set the
Does that
table
make it
at
better?
Thanksgiving. Oh, you would have envisioned me in a position fucking an amorphous blob. I mean, that's just not how the mind works.
It was coming from the. See, I wanted to know your how maybe it was a cautionary tale, like can't bend back. I would have tried that move.
No, but her breast got bigger, and she was like, "This is unfair. It's like you get to get in bed with a stranger. Like, we've been together for a very long time." And I was like, "Well, let me see what I can do." And then once I got this mustache, I remember getting into bed that night being like, "Hi, my name is Randy." And
she's like, "It's not the same thing."
Yeah. She's like, "This isn't, first of all, an alter ego named Randy is not doing it for me." We watched Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe last night, and I got into bed like Aslan the lion. And I was just like,
Oh, there you go, Jay. This is the animal work in his sex life that you were asking about.
That also did not get her going. I kind of like puffed my hair out and I was like, I am Aslan. She's like, first of all, you sound like the dude from Transformers. Second of all, this is not getting me turned on. And, yeah. So, again, I'm just going to vouch for animals, not organizations, just animals.
I miss you, man. It's
miss
so good
you guys.
to see you,
miss
Scott.
you, Ace. I'm so glad you guys are in separate log cabins, but still together with your backgrounds.
I've grown to like my background. I'm kind of into it.
Why did you choose the ash-colored log cabin?
I was worried I would disappear against a brown wood background, and it's to be determined because I have one being flown to my house. I have a wood wall being flown to my house.
Of it sounds like they're building the wood wall now.
I mean, my wife refused to stop the work. She's like, you won't even notice it.
Okay. Be honest. It was like, who do you have on? You're like, Hayes' brother. She's like, absolutely not.
Let him work through it.
Didn't make the list. Don't know who that is.
No, we're not stopping construction for this conversation.
All right, thanks. That was fun.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
I know.
A lot of fun.
Mustache Tales.